Hello, and welcome to another episode of Chatter, a podcast from The Gist, with me, Josh Hamilton. Hezues R, the creative and filmmaker, was my guest on today's show. Amongst other things, Hezues created the official fragrance for the royal wedding of Prince William and Kate Middleton, and ran a handful of advertising campaigns for P. Diddy. In this conversation, we went through some of the ideas that he's explored in his upcoming film, Suicide Scene, which attempts to raise the ideas of suicide as a major problem for the developed world, and to promote the idea of art over algorithms in a Hollywood culture obsessed with focus groups and profit. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list, and don't forget my book, BREXIT, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. So here's Hezues R. Hezues, it's an absolute pleasure. Thank you for coming on my show.
It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate you having me on your show.
No, not a problem. So let's just dive straight in. I know you're a busy man. So I listened to some interviews with you where you talked about branding not being an important thing for an individual to pursue. That you feel that, or you can correct me if I'm wrong, but you feel that you should just let your work speak for yourself. And I find that kind of not ironic, but I was curious to get you to explain what you meant, because the 21st century is so much about you have to become your own brand and you have to sell yourself. That's what it's all about. And the man that embodies that the most potentially of anyone in history is currently your president. So
Sure.
do you really think that you can just let your work speak for yourself in the 21st century?
Well, I'd make a distinction and a clarification there. I would say if I was giving advice to millennials or up-and-coming filmmakers that, absolutely they should be focused on building their brand, because the way the industry works, everything is defined by algorithms, right? Whether it's YouTube or Hollywood, arts have become a business. And the way algorithms work in the film industry is they pad a project with whatever A-list actors or accredited writers or name value directors, and they mitigate their risk and their profit potential based on calculating those algorithms. Films aren't greenlit on their artistic merit or their impact or social good. And that's the challenge that I have. And, part of my fight in making this film is to push this idea of art over algorithms for us to kind of change the paradigm of what we consider important to create as art. But for me, I've always done myself, we'll see, a couple of years from now how things pan out, right, for the rest of my career and legacy and the impact I make. But I've always, for me, whether it was film or advertising, especially in the advertising world, in the corporate structure, and so many people serving themselves in their careers and trying to get ahead, I always felt like no matter what project I was working on, it was important to serve the brand. At the end of the day, it wasn't my, it wasn't my personal exposure or status climb or anything else in the industry that mattered. For me, it was whatever project I'm working on that needs to be successful in its own light, because that's your craft. The work is a product of your craft, and if you're more focused on yourself than the work, unfortunately, that's the age that we live in now, right? Because to your point, we live in this self-fulfilling vanity culture of social media that then predicates these false realities, because now everyone's comparing themselves to other people's lives, and that's not even that person's true life, right? They're branding themselves to such a high level that society is no longer real. And I think that's the problem when you get so self-absorbed in this high level of branding that now everybody's a brand. Nobody's a real person anymore. So it goes past the art to start to hurt society.
I mean, a book that I read this year by Naomi Klein is called No Logo, and I believe it was written about 20 years ago. and it was all about the sort of decline of unbranded spaces, and talked about how, you know, people as a brand was growing, and it was quite interesting to see how her predictions and sort of her assessment has really panned out over the last 20 years. But you focused in on your phrase, the art over algorithms. Do you want to like give a little bit more explanation of what exactly you mean there?
Yeah, well, for me, when I look at the world today, and I think about what encourages or engages people to create arts. Now it's about money. It doesn't matter if you're in the music industry, the film industry, like all these industries have been perverted by profit. And because the goal is profit, it's no longer about what's going to inspire or make the world beautiful. And if you go back, you know, many years when we had a Renaissance period, and, you know, artists were doing amazing things, and whether, see, I don't want to be off of my history here. I don't know if the Sistine Chapel was part of the Renaissance period, but my point is there's a time in history
I think
where
it was, because Michelangelo was definitely like a Renaissance painter, so he must have done it at that time.
Okay, so wherever that time period is, like for me, when I look back, it's at the art, the literature, the theater, you know, classical music, all, you know, everything wasn't about, or I could be wrong because I'm not thinking about it in terms of how much money they made or how they made their money, but I look at it more in a viewpoint of a lot of artists were commissioned, and there were certain people in society that they had to work. And if you're an artist, it wasn't a business, right? Like in the US, I look at the film industry now as a business, you know, because we went from paintings to, you know, photographs to moving pictures with sound, and like, granted, they have to make this investment, right? Somebody has to foot the bill for the production, and then because they're taking a risk, they want to make a profit. But I think that defeats the purpose of us having art in society, because all these other careers and things that we have, the arts is something that we're supposed to fall back on that says, this is why life is beautiful and this is why life is worth living, right? Mm-hmm. We're able to not veg out, but tune in, right? We're supposed to get our inspiration from these things that we understand why life is beautiful and society is beautiful. And now those great inspiring films are too few in between, and we're just, with music and everything else, there's just so much bullshit, if you don't mind me cursing on
No, go for it.
But and I think, you know, that does a disservice to society. You know, right now Rome is burning. We're just destroying ourselves, and this is why, you know, I'm so passionate about this film and addressing mental health, because of all these different things with social media and the decline of the arts, and us not focusing on the beauty over money. Our mental health has suffered, and, you know, suicide rates have increased 30% in the last 2 decades for children. It's increased 70%, children 10 and 17. So there definitely needs to be a big deconstruct of how we create arts, and how people engage their intentions and their motives for wanting to make something.
I definitely want to talk about your new film and suicide, but quickly, just before we get to that, do you really think there's a contradiction between profit making and like really truly like individual, like not like mass produced or not formulaic art? Because honestly, sometimes it confuses me that the studios or people who are funding projects don't get that, like something that's truly like raw or individual or unique isn't necessarily unprofitable. In fact, in a world where things have become quite sort of formulaic, something more individual is almost, I don't know, has more potential to have profit and seem more real. Like, do you think that's not taken into consideration?
You would think so. You would think that would make sense, but you know, less people believe that, right? And it's this idea of supply and demand. So, you know, an easier thing to look at that's more understandable or relatable is the music industry, because there's a little more transparency on the success of the records and the streams and what hits and doesn't hit, right? Like commercially, nobody listens to conscious rap, although that would improve society by so many multiple factors. Records like WAP. I don't know if you guys listen to WAP over there by Cardi B and Meg Thee Stallion. It's like, what kind of message is that sending to young girls? And I understand that there's this, argument for, okay, there's everybody should have their well, one of our amendments here? I'm losing my your freedom of speech.
No, your freedom of speech. Yeah, people express themselves whatever they want. Yeah.
Yeah, you figure like, okay, people are supposed to have their freedom of speech, and me being, the staunch artist, maybe this is kind of hip, being me blasphemous for saying artists shouldn't have this level of expression. But I think in terms of commercial norms and what we're putting on society, yes, there's a time and a place for everything. And I feel like that type of record doesn't need to exist in this world. Okay, if somebody wants to exploit the freaky side of themselves and talk about sex in such a prolific way, great. But for it to be the mainstream commercial message, the number one thing in the world, what is that doing for society and for our young girls, and the impression that, and the same thing with rap music, when everything is about predicating the or perpetuating this idea of us being killers and gangsters, and now the young kids think, well, this is what's cool. So when the arts influence us, films influence us, our self-identity, how we perceive each other culturally, our social cues on how we're supposed to behave and engage and interact emotionally, from all the way down from we're little toddlers watching cartoons. Like, this is what we pick up and we learn and we become.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, I know Ben Shapiro got a lot of hate for his reaction to the WAP video, and it was, I mean, he did sound like an old man, like, going through it, but I mean, he had some valid points.
What did he say?
He was just basically making the same critique as you, but like in his very sort of like well-to-do way, was literally just reading out the lyrics. It was so funny.
Yeah.
But I feel like he had a bit of a point. I mean, there's a song that always comes to mind called Or Nah, with Wiz Khalifa and The Weeknd and Ty Dolla $ign, and it's filthy, and I love that song. But I'm not sure I would want, like, if I had, like, I don't know, 12, 13-year-old like kids, I'm not sure I would want them listening to that. But like, anyway, that's just me. But yeah, we're here to talk about your new film mainly. So do you want to basically give us like a little overlay of what the new film is about, and then I can sort of follow up with some questions that I've got?
Yeah, look, I don't mind if we talk about these other things. I'm not here to sell the film.
Well, that's true, but no, I do.
As crazy as that sounds, like, I'm having an interview about the film, but I don't care about promoting the film.
That's fair.
That goes back to this idea that the art should speak for itself, right?
True.
You got some sake going on over there?
I mean, it's just a bit. It's just a bit of tea. It's Red Bush tea, but it's in like a little tea set I got from Vietnam. It's great because it keeps it hot, so that like I can drink it for like an hour and it just stays like nice and warm. So it's because it's only the little cups. I wish it was sake.
Nice. I don't want to blow you up in front of your listeners that you're drinking on.
I don't care. No, I mean, at some point I am gonna get like really drunk on air with one of my best friends, but that not yet. We'll openly admit that in advance when that happens.
Listen, that's a famous thing here in the U.S. too. They have a show called Drink Champs. They just bring on rappers and they just get drunk and try to pull out the truth.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to check that out.
But yeah, I'll be happy to talk about Suicide Saint, of course. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, brother. Tell me.
Yeah, like, so, I mean, there's a stat that came out in the research I was doing for your film about for this interview, is that 800,000 people around the world commit suicide every year. And in Northern Ireland, it's we have a really high rate compared to the rest of the UK. So it's something that's like very much like in the heads of people here. It's been focused on in the last sort of 5-10 years. I remember there was campaigns in my university because there was a guy who had been in the same course as me, had committed suicide, but like that number is so close to the number of people that have been killed by COVID. Like at the minute, I think it's nearing 1 million estimated worldwide, and yet I don't think we view suicide as anywhere near the level of problem that we view COVID. And I'm curious as to whether you think that this pandemic will make us think differently about things like suicide that take the lives of so many people globally, like every year.
I think that it's going to make, and already is making us think differently about a lot of things. Everything has changed, and I don't think anything will ever be the same. In a good, and some people feel that in a bad way, but other people understand in a good way. I'm hoping that there's a positive change and more awareness for mental health, because to your point, the rate of suicides is like one person every 40 seconds is taking their life, and it's really unfortunate, because we do ourselves the disservice of like the one thing that could benefit us the most and improve our lives the most is focusing on our mental health. We've created this stigma, like we've created this idea that we're weak if we talk about it, or it's not okay to talk about it with friends, or if somebody has a severe illness that's a friend or in our family, there's an embarrassment or shame, or like all these things that we want to bury deep down inside of us, when the thing that helps us is to share or to get help. And it's unfortunate, because 80 to 90% of people who go and get help, the help is successful, whether they get therapy or prescription drugs or whatever it is. But more than 60% of people don't ever go to get help. So you have a society that's suffering and nobody wants to talk about it or do anything about it. But we put all this attention and focus on our financial health, on our physical health, on all these other things that we want to chase, money or whatever, that we think is going to, be this, our pursuit of happiness, when all we really need to do is just fix our mental health. Because the interesting thing about this, subject matter and this issue is that, one, it impacts every other problem that we have in society. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter if it's racism, domestic violence, even down if you don't have illness, just the smallest infraction of road rage, your temper, your mood, all these things are regulated by your mental health. And
your physical health as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Your stress, all these things are way down on you, right? So it impacts every other aspect of society, all the societal ills that we have. If we can be in a much more stable, balanced mindset, we can fix these other things, right? The root of all these other issues we face are derived from our mental. And then two, it impacts every area, every level of society. It doesn't matter what race, ethnicity, social status you have in life. If you come from poverty and adversity, or if you come from absolute privilege, people are still suffering from mental health. People still have, no matter how rich and famous you are, people are still dealing with self-doubt, depression, anxiety. The biggest actors in the world, the biggest comedians in the world, the biggest fashion designers, unfortunately in the fashion industry, people like Kate Spade and Alexander McQueen hung themselves. Like this affects everyone. It's not per a particular class or group, or it's not something that we should be polarized in politics or different views of science and how people are addressing the pandemic. Here in the US, we have the most ridiculous arguments. Some people want to wear a mask, other people don't want to wear a mask. Like, why would you not want to wear a mask? Like,
I mean, they're irritating, but like that's the side.
No, look, nobody likes to wear them. Like, we all hate wearing them, but it's a social contract that you have with society, that you don't live in a world by yourself. You can't argue and say, oh, these are my personal rights. You can't tell me to wear a fucking mask. I can do whatever I want. That's ignorant, because you don't live in this world by yourself. You live. It's a social contract that there's other people around you. Look, this is something we all want to get rid of and want it to go away, right? So participate in that process. And I won't go on into politics of that, but if everyone had a clearer view of more stability, right? Like, because where does that greed for that self-right come from, right? Does that come from an insecurity? Was that person, deny things as in their childhood? Everything comes from a sort of trauma, and hurt other people. And I feel like people who are excessively greedy or selfish, or focused on them above other people, don't have a really good balance. I feel like for us to have a good balance, we should be kind and compassionate and considerate, and think about more what unites us instead of focused on all the things that divide us.
I mean, one of the things I'm hopeful for the pandemic, or at least for the lockdown itself, is that people have had a little more time to kind of reflect on themselves and maybe sort of have a little more time to think and sort of help themselves in sort of confronting maybe things they'd been putting off, or sort of realizing that maybe we weren't happy with certain parts of their life. So I'm like cautiously optimistic about how people might react, but I'm also aware that it might go the complete other way, and the isolation might be really really trying for a lot of people. But
yeah, I was gonna, before you get into your next question, I just want to make a comment on that. Yeah, that could be, good and bad impact, right? Because even, in New York, I read some article where like the divorce rates shot up when all these people were at home. So it's like maybe there was couples that were in and out going to work and out going to work, and now they live with each other, realizing like, oh wait, I don't really get along with this other person. Or people being at home for so long and being isolated, maybe for some people gives them time to reflect, and other people they're facing their demons, or they're living inside their head. We're in a society where we're so stuck inside of our own head, right? Everything in life isn't about what happens to you, but it's how you react to it. And it's how you perceive the world that determines if you're happy or not, right? You can have people with the same circumstances, and this person is happy and couldn't be more grateful, and this person is just miserable, or they feel entitled and they should have more, or what have you. So all these things come from our mind.
Yeah, I mean, there's a really interesting thing. You said that we're all sort of stuck inside our own mind. It's funny, like I've been trying to do a social media detox for the whole month after reading this book called Digital Minimalism, because it talked a lot about how important it is for our brain to have just space, like just space with silence, that we can just like think and let our mind kind of wander, and when we're not scrolling something on social media or listening to something, or just we're constantly bombarded with stuff taking our attention in the 21st century. And he was kind of putting forward that perhaps one of the reasons for like the rise in mental health problems over the past like 20 years was just less and less time for our own mind, in order to sort of just like figure ourselves out. I feel like boredom is a really useful tool at times for being able to like work through things in your head, and we kind of lost that a little bit, I think, in the last sort of 20 years, very very slowly. But going on to
I absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more, and I think part of that is this idea that we live in a time now where there's something about 50 years ago, Future Shock. Are you familiar with Future Shock by Alvin Toffler? So if you think about I'll reference it here, but if you think about the existence of humanity, right? They've been living, and this was written in 1970. So, and I didn't fact check these numbers. I don't know if scientists have studied longer than 50,000 years yet or not, or whatever. But based off of this, which makes a lot of sense to me in the understanding of it, like some of these numbers could change, but when I get to the end point, hopefully you get the point why I'm bringing it up. But
okay.
When you think about our lifetimes, right? We've lived with an average, lifespan of say like 62 years old for one generation to the next. Over 50,000 years, that's been 800 lifetimes, right? So out of 800 lifetimes of the whole existence of man, 650 of those lifetimes we've been in caves, right? And in the last 70, only in the last 70 out of 800 lifetimes, have we had writing, right? Where we have writing and recording history. In the last 6 lifetimes has been mass printing, right? We're going back to 372 years.
Yeah.
In the last 4 lifetimes, have we had an accurate measure of time? In the last 2 lifetimes, we've had the electric motor. So now if you think about us being in existence for 800 lifetimes, right? 50,000 years, but only in the last 2 years we've had last 2 lifetimes. You know, in the last 124 years we have the electric motor. And then what's more profound is just in one lifetime, we're just talking the last couple decades, have we had cell phones and computers. So it's like we're our physical constructs and the way our mind works. And you talk about us needing to have this space to breathe. And, you know, we started out as hunters and gatherers, and society was so simple where it was like, hey, I'll go and kill the buffalo and come back, and, you know, my wife will skin it up and we'll make dinner and we'll put on our furs and we'll survive the winter. Like, it was way more simplified. And now we have all these jobs and careers and industries and businesses, and like we built all this bullshit that really doesn't mean anything, right? And we've given so much, a tremendous amount of importance to all these different things that I guess is supposed to make us more sophisticated or educated or whatever. But I see society deteriorating, destroying itself because we're more divided by all these different ideals that we have. The fact that people argue over a fucking mask, like, I mean, I'm on one side of the argument, so I'm a victim of it but I feel like that's the space that we're in, that we're all making sense of our views and opinions, but and call me a hypocrite if you will, but like that's the things that were made important that I'm ultimately saying aren't really that important. Now that we live in that construct, I feel like, okay, this is how we should be sensible. But yeah, only in the last one lifetime out of 50,000 years do we have cell phones and computers, and we're not doing enough to make the proper adjustments to balance or combat the impact that technology has on us, right? I had a big I don't know if we call it falling out or if we're going to come back to the table, but I really cursed the fuck out these executives at YouTube, because they were nice enough last year to have me. I brought kids from my film school to the YouTube space in New York, and I thought we were building a good relationship, and we were having this real talk on their platform. And when I talked to them about spotlighting content that was inspirational, they gave me some bullshit about, well, we let the platform dictate, or the algorithms dictate what comes to the highest, so it's fair to all the content creators in our community. And then the next week I get some emails spotlighting some of their creators. It's like, this is absolute bullshit. They just want to focus on their money makers, or the content that's going to keep driving. And even if we all live in a world where it's like sometimes the loudest people are the most ignorant people, so the ones that are rising to the top of those algorithms are people who are self-absorbed or vanity or profit-driven, and they're just trying to get likes and followers and this and that, and they're making the most noise online. And if you look within the arts community, it's the same thing. The people with the biggest followers are usually trash, and the greatest artists don't even have an Instagram or social media page. So what does that? What balance happens in society? Right now, all the good stuff is undiscovered, and we have our social norms of what we think. Our overall average view of culture is based on algorithms and not based on something real, right? Because real artists don't want to exploit themselves and sell their shit. They just want to make dope shit and then inspire people. Yeah.
I mean, I guess like some of that's got to be because we've definitely got lazy as as a society. Like, people used to have to go to, say, like a record store and trawl through like hundreds of records to find that one that they really loved, or that one that they've been waiting for. And now we just kind of like log on and click it, expect to have 3 clicks and have like the 10 top new songs in the like, I know, on the chart this week, and then all the new releases from all your favorite artists just like there. And it kind of goes like there's a whole bunch of movements. I don't know if you've heard of them. They're sort of just, they're called like slow media, slow food, things like that. So it's slow news.
Yeah.
That their point is that people should take time to cultivate like actually genuinely good things, because you enjoy it more when you've taken the time to cultivate it. And part of what I think is kind of, I don't know, caused, maybe, like, you can disagree with me, but I think a lot of the mental health problems that are caused these days is because most of the technology we've created is like a poor substitute for like real humanity or real interaction. and we constantly go after it, craving what it's replaced without actually ever getting it. I mean, what do you think's caused like the sort of rise in suicide rates in the more developed nations in the world, and especially like mental health problems amongst younger people? Like, what's your assessment on it?
Well, first I would say that I love this idea of the slow movement, right? Mm. But unfortunately, we live in a world where success is, based on speed and what it's fast food, fastest. Like, we live in this instant gratification microwave society, and it's only going to get worse because now the whole world is going to have 5G, and then it's going to be, 6G and 10G. Like, we're just going to be, we're really burning the fuses in our minds, right? Like,
that's a great way of putting it. I'm gonna write.
Yeah, like we're just we're not like, we definitely need to slow down. I think technology, as much as it's a gift in some ways, where it brings where I guess the points of it that I used to see as a gift are also starting to deteriorate, because for me, I used to view it that, okay, in a lot of ways, it puts the hands back in the power of the people, because you no longer have to rely on these systems and these studios and news stations that create all this propaganda that, I guess at the very beginning of it, maybe 10 years ago, there was a moment where they didn't figure it all out. And we were like, okay, now we can self-publish. Now new artists could get on without having to depending on the system. But they've kind of came back in and regulated, and now they're using social media to create all their propaganda, because they realize that, hey, people no longer watch TV and the news anymore. They get all their information from their timelines and their social feeds. So now that's been perverted, because now we have all of our misinformation online, right? And there's so many people just, man, I could go on about that. But to your question about the increase in suicide and these other things, it's the pressure, it's the anxiety. The more stuff that is crowding your mind, and the more you're overworked of these different expectancies, and the more that these comparisons, you're comparing yourself to other people's lives, and people going the club, they might have had to wait online for 2 hours. They get in the club, they finally get in there, they're standing next to somebody else's table, they take a shot next to the bottle, whatever. Hey, I'm bowling, and that 1 second, and people at home thinking like, oh my gosh, their life is so much better. Mine, not knowing that this motherfucker's broke and then even like barely got in there or whatever. Like, people just try to find the smallest moment in their day to make it look like their life is so fabulous. If you can go out to dinner with somebody, you could be on a date, and it's like you're miserable the whole time, you're arguing, but you might find that one moment, oh, smile, or or take a picture of the food or whatever it is. Like, everybody's trying to brand themselves, like to your point earlier, and create this illusion, and not realizing that we're all suffering and we all have problems. We all face the same problems. If we would just speak about those problems, then we'd be like, damn, their life isn't that much better than mine. Maybe what I have it. I got it good. It's not that bad. And because people get so, and then this cancel culture and everything else, where like, that's the worst thing ever. Feeling like you can just throw people away. Like, people make mistakes. We don't need to throw them away for their mistakes. We need to find out what the root of that problem is. Where does that come from? Mm-hmm. Where we're just going to just keep throwing away people to half of the world is thrown away. Like, you can't get them back after you throw them away. Like, it's a bunch of senseless bullshit. I'm hoping that we all wake up, and that's why I'm passionate about making a film like this, to try to change the narrative, to change the way films are made in Hollywood, and to impact the way people think about mental health itself.
Like, one of the things that I'm kind of hopeful about is whether we're gonna adapt to the sort of the 21st century, like, constant bombardment world. I mean, I've noticed, especially amongst like people of my generation, that they're kind of like, one by one, they're just slowly like switching off from being online all the time, or taking stuff like apps off their phone, or just little steps like that, just personally taking it. And do you think that there's a chance that, like, when TV came out, right, people thought that it was just, that was the end, like that we were just going to be brainwashed duds who would just sit in front of the TV the whole time. And that's not the reality. Of course, some people do. But I mean, do you think that there's a chance that we might be able to like learn to live with that kind of technology, but be able to just like train ourselves to turn it off, take the benefits we need or want from it or feel we get, and then kind of just sort of cast the rest away? Like, because I still feel like there's an element of novelty to it. Like, it might be maybe 10 years old, but that, to your point about like what's new for, that's still like half a generation out of 800. You know, do you think we can learn and kind of, you know, improve our relationship with it?
Well, I will say this. I mean, it you know, because what is it? We use, I don't know what they say. We use 5%, 10% of our brains.
I mean, that's like almost total bullshit. Actually.
Oh, okay.
I know. I know.
Well, I've heard these different things. I haven't gone to research or whatever.
No,
but,
I remember.
I
saw a debunking video about that stat. It was yeah. It's yeah.
Okay, so then we have no hope. Then forget about it. I was gonna say. I was gonna give us some credit and say, hey, look, the mind is an amazing thing, and it's we have infinite capacities, and
I don't think that's not true.
Hey, if we have, only 5%, that our all that other percentage we're not using. But if we're already maxed out, if that's been debunked, then we're hopeless.
sorry.
We are hope, society really is this dumb. We're just we are hopeless. No, I think, it's of course it's going to change when you have, kids, as much as it's so against human nature and what's natural and what, if we have the abilities to create these things, that has to exist for some reason, right? We can't just say that we're never going to evolve. And if this, came from some foreign place and we didn't have the ability to create it, but we're creating it, right? Whether, some people think that Steve Jobs was an alien and if this was from, or whatever, like how the pyramids were made. I don't know if you got some new information for me on the pyramids, but all these,
the pyramids are
things
mad though, that like seriously mad. There's the thing that gets me is like right above the King's Chamber, there's these like 100-ton like granite blocks. And I, like, in my head, I'm always like, they must have had like a crane of some form. But I'm like, how fucking big would the crane need to be to get this thing in place?
Man, it was floating that shit with telekinesis. They were just like, their minds are so simple and they're just able to have full control of the universe. Yeah, I think we're just so divided and distracted now. There's just too much to think about that you never get a moment of peace. And the increase and speed and technology, I can see, as a species will adapt, and then and at some point they'll probably just put computer chips in our brains, so so literally it'll be able to just process certain stuff for us, and then maybe there'll be a new revolution of freeing up our natural minds to get back to some state of balance. But I think it's. I don't know. I've always been optimistic. So as much as I want to delve into how scary some of the things can be, from just how bad I see things getting, I'm hopeful that there's a realization at some point. I don't know when that breaking or tipping point is going to be, where people are like, "Fuck it, this is just not going to work if we keep going in this direction." I mean, we haven't figured it out for global warming or any of these other issues. People are still just focused on profit. So I don't know. I don't know what that outcome is going to be. And until we can prove that love and is more important than money, I think it's going to continually be challenging.
I mean, I feel like the lockdown might be able to change a few things I'm a hopeless optimist in this category, and I'm currently like trying to figure out exactly what it might change. But I think it's really gonna change the way we kind of look at a lot of things, hopefully for the better. But I have to go for another call here in a minute, so I'm just gonna go for a final question. Like, what would your biggest tip for an aspiring sort of filmmaker or creative be in 2020?
Focus on what makes you different. Don't get sucked up into, you know, what's cool, or what the industry is trying to bait you into creating, right? We get sucked into this vacuum of like, oh, well, this is hot and that's hot. You got to do something, even when you're pitching it, it's like this with that. And then, like people get so lost in this world of competing. And I think when you're creating art is not about competition, and art is not about profit. Art is about creating something original, it's beautiful and inspiring. And hopefully you can stay true to that, and that your art will also make a positive impact on society and change some of these problems that we're dealing with.
Okay, well that's a pretty nice note to be able to end things on. So yeah, man, it's been an absolute pleasure. I got to thank you for being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Josh.
And your new film, Suicide Saint, is out when?
12/22/21 next year.
12/22/21. Okay, I will keep an eye out for it.
Awesome. All right. Have a wonderful day.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much for listening. If you haven't already and you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to this podcast and to our mailing list. And don't forget, my book, BREXIT, The Establishment Civil War, is now available for pre-order on Amazon. You'll find the link in the description below. Until next time, thanks for listening.